What's up, everybody? Welcome to BTM, to the Basketball Time Machine, the podcast with former NBA players about former NBA players. Before we get to today's guest, just make sure you hit that subscribe button so you always get notified once you upload a new podcast. So today's guest played in the NBA from 1990 until 1998. Sean Higgins, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Great name, by the way.
Oh, definitely the best name in the world.
That's right.
Sean, are you still watching NBA basketball?
Oh, yeah. I'm a big fan of the game, man. I'll watch the game until I die.
Wow, okay. You got a favorite team?
Well, I wouldn't say I have a favorite team. I have teams that I prefer to watch over others.
Okay, so who's that?
I like watching the Warriors. I like watching the Spurs. Now that LeBron's in LA, I keep an eye on those guys. Who else? Philadelphia's coming around now. Mostly the former teams I played for, really. I played for 6 different teams, and 2 of those I just mentioned, or 3 of those I just mentioned, I played for.
All right. Any current player that reminds you a little of yourself, playing-wise?
Yeah, Kevin Durant reminds me a lot of myself. Being 6'9", Kevin Durant 6'10", 6'11", he can put the ball on the floor, he can shoot it from the outside. So yeah, Kevin Durant reminds me a little bit of myself.
All right. Are you still playing once in a while?
Yeah, I play a little bit. I do player development, so I get on the floor with my players and mess around a little bit.
All right, so you still got it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I still have it. I don't have the legs I used to, but I can still stroke it. I can still shoot the ball.
All right. Who was your idol when you were a kid? Who was your basketball hero?
As my favorite basketball player? Yeah. I would say Magic Johnson and George Gervin. Not in that particular order, but those are my 2 favorites.
So the tall guys who could handle the ball.
Yeah, Magic Johnson, George Gervin. I'm originally from Michigan, so those 2 guys being from Michigan. When you're from the state of Michigan, you kind of like inherit the Magic Johnson, Iceman persona, if you will, in terms of your style and the way you play.
Good that you mentioned Michigan. That would have been my next question. So you played college ball in Michigan. 1 year prior to the Fab Five, is that correct? Or was it 2 years prior?
I was there 4 years prior, 4 years prior to the Fab Five. They came in the year after I would have been a senior. I ended up leaving Michigan for the NBA after my junior season.
Your team had some pretty good NBA players. What was so special about the program in Michigan that they had so many guys who actually made it to the NBA?
I think just the way we competed every day in practice against each other. I mean, we all had talent and the ability to play at the next level, but I think just, our practices were more competitive than our games. And I think that prepared us for the long haul of the NBA.
All right. So you were drafted in 1990 by the Spurs. What was the first thought that went through your head when you heard your name being called?
Well, for one, I was happy to just be called because, I was a 2nd round pick. And, a lot of picks went ahead of me. I was the last player precisely in the draft. And, being drafted by San Antonio, like I just mentioned, George Gervin, the Iceman, being one of my childhood favorites, that was the franchise that he, carved his career out in.
As you mentioned, you landed on the Spurs, and the Spurs were just off the hook back in the days. David Robinson was pretty young. I think it was his 2nd season. Rod Strickland, to me, one of the most underrated point guards in NBA history. Sean Elliott, Terry Cummings, so loaded. Like, how difficult was it to find your role on the team and to get minutes with such a great roster?
Well, I took the approach, being one of the youngest guys in the whole league at the time. I think it was only 2 or 3 other guys younger than me at the time. I took it as a learning experience, having, the fortune of being drafted by a team with so many great veterans on it. It was a learning experience for me. And I think that kind of attributed to the fact that I played 8 years being the last pick in the league. At the time, no other player had done that.
You just mentioned your team. Any specific player who helped you a great deal?
Yeah, we had a gentleman on the team. I played my high school ball in Los Angeles at Fairfax High School, and we had a guy on the team by the name of David Greenwood, who was from Los Angeles. He was a 16-year veteran in the NBA when I was a rookie. And him and Terry Cummings, those two guys kind of took me under their wing. David Robinson was influential. This the whole team. Paul Pressey, those guys really, took a liking to me because I came in and I wasn't a boisterous young player. I came in, humble and just worked hard every day. So, those guys were really influential in terms of me learning the ropes of how to be a professional.
Yeah. You're one of the toughest coaches in NBA history. You played for Larry Brown. How was it playing under such a, now coaching legend?
Well, I always tell people that, if it wasn't for Coach Brown, I probably wouldn't have played, the 8 years that I did because, in the NBA, especially back in, today too, but, the NBA is a lot of isolations. And I was a good team defender in college, but, having to be in 6'9" and playing, the big guard position, that's the toughest position to guard in the NBA. So Larry Brown taught me how to take fakes defensively with my back foot instead of taking them with my front foot so I could keep players in front of me. And, that was something that really, helped me in terms of being able to get minutes with the teams that I played for because I was guarding guys as small as Chris Jackson, who is now Abdul Rauf. I guarded him for 38 minutes one night when I played with Golden State at 6'9".
Oh, wow. Now that you mentioned Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, could you please do me a favor and tell the younger generation how good that guy was? Because he's also just like Rod Strickland, so underrated.
Oh, so underrated. I'll give you a backdrop. Abdul Rauf at the time was Chris Jackson. He was on my Nike All-American camp team. We were loaded with a lot of guys. We went 10-0 in that camp. He was a year younger than me, and or a class younger than me. And he was 16 at the time, and I saw greatness in him then. I knew he was going to be a great player just because of his dexterity with the basketball and his shooting ability. He had such a quick release. And, he was dedicated to the game. I could see that at 16 at Nike camp. But, definitely he was underrated. And I think the only reason he was underrated because of the fallout that he had, over the national anthem and being, quote-unquote, blackballed, if you will. I think that really cut, his notoriety and his popularity short in terms of him being overrated. But if he had stayed around the NBA, man, he would definitely been in the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely, absolutely. Did you see him play in Ice Cube's Big 3 League?
I did. It was unbelievable. He represented for all of us over 45 guys.
Absolutely.
And
I think he's 47.
Amazing.
He was the best player on the court.
Yes, he was. Well, he takes care of his body, for one. He doesn't drink. He doesn't hang out late at night. He gets his rest. He takes care of his body because of his faith.
Talking about the Spurs again, do you remember the playoff series? Your team had an incredible season, and unfortunately in the playoffs you faced Run TMC, the Golden State Warriors. What do you recall from that before the contest?
Well,
have you ever seen Spud dunk before?
The first round of playoffs was the best of 5, and we had Golden State down 2-0, and they came back to beat us 3-2, and it was crazy because we thought we had them, after we went up 2-0, Tim Hardaway and Mitch Richmond, they just went berserk. And, I don't know what got into them, but it's like they couldn't miss. And, we lost. And, I think that's what dismantled our team because, the year before, the same thing happened with the Portland Trail Blazers to the Spurs. I think that was the Western Conference Finals or right before the Western Conference Finals. They lost to Clyde Drexler and the Portland Trail Blazers. So that was 2 years in a row that we were disappointed in the playoffs. So I think that was the start of the organization starting to go in another direction.
Yeah. So after you played for the Spurs, you also joined the Orlando Magic, which were a pretty brand new franchise at the time. So prior to Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway. How was it from a player's perspective, playing for a new franchise, not knowing what exactly to expect?
Well, for me, going to Orlando was a sense of a new beginning. because I knew I was going to get more minutes being on a young team compared to being the Spurs playing on a veteran team. And so at the time, I went down and I had some career numbers. I set a franchise record at the time. I made 12 out of 12 field goals consecutive field goals in a game. Finished that game with 29 points in 28 minutes. And so I had some career numbers in Orlando. Matty Guokas was great. Had a chance to play with some great guys, Greg Kite, Nick Anderson, Terry Catledge, Scott Skiles. We didn't win a lot of games, but, the experience, I was only 23 at the time, so the experience was really beneficial to me, gaining confidence and just believing that I can play in this league.
Just tell me, you just mentioned Scott Skiles, who used to be the point guard for the Orlando Magic before Penny Hardaway, let's say, emerged. What can you tell me about Scott Skiles and his point guard skills?
Oh, well, Scotty, man, he's a wizard with the basketball. He's he can score, he can pass. And the thing I think what really sets Scott, aside from, most guys of his stature, he was tough as nails. Scott Skiles will run through a brick wall and he'll fight anybody. That's the thing about Scott Skiles. I don't know if you ever heard the story about him challenging Shaquille O'Neal when he was a rookie. Yeah,
yes.
and that's a true story. And who would challenge Shaquille O'Neal? But Scott Skiles, he did, and Scotty was a beast, man. To be a small, he's from Plymouth, Indiana, and small town, rural town in Midwest America, and he comes from a tough, hardcore background, pedigree, if you will.
So you already mentioned the Golden State Warriors. You played against them in the playoffs. And what happens if 1 year later, or 1.5 years later, you play for the Golden State Warriors? You play with Chris Mullin. Yeah, you play with Tim Hardaway. Was it different to playing with the Spurs?
Yes.
How?
Well, Golden State was another team that was at the bottom of the division at the time. And, going up there, I had the opportunity to play for another legendary coach in Don Nelson. And what was the beauty of that was the fact that Greg Popovich, who was an assistant coach my first 2 years with the Spurs, he was now the assistant coach with Golden State. And Pop was a mentor of mine. He kind of took me under his wing, as I mentioned, being a young player. And, they let me really express my true basketball spirit in Golden State. Don Nelson liked big guards. When he was in Milwaukee, he had Sidney Moncrief in Milwaukee and Alvin Robinson. No, I'm sorry, not Alvin Robinson, Paul Pressey. Paul Pressey and Sidney Moncrief was his two big guards in Milwaukee, and he liked the three-guard offense. So he allowed me to really take advantage of my size against smaller players. And that was really advantageous for me as well, because that was the first time I was able to do that since high school. Even in college with the great talent we had there, I had to play such of a role. Don Nelson let me play with a lot more freedom.
So after playing in Greece, New Jersey, Philadelphia, and for the Portland Trailblazers, you were retired. So in hindsight, what was your personal highlight? What was the greatest event of your basketball career?
Winning the national championship in college. That I'll take that to my grave. That was the reason why I went to the University of Michigan. And that was the premise of my recruiting. Every time the coaching staff called to recruit me, they always listed the guys they already had, and then they included my name in that bunch. And they always talked about, just imagine this lineup. We could win 2 or 3 championships. And unfortunately, I never won a state championship in high school. And that really, kind of annoyed me. It pissed me off that I didn't win a state championship in high school. I tried 3 times. And so I wanted to win a big championship. I wanted to win the big one. And, I thought the University of Michigan, in terms of personnel, had the best opportunity for us to win a national championship. And the fact that I'm originally from Michigan, specifically Ann Arbor. I went to elementary school in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And so, it was a match made in heaven for me. And, I just got along with all the guys. So that was my best, playing experience outside of high school. My high school teammates were really dear to me, as well as my college teammates. And, that's what I miss most about playing the game, just being around the fellas and the camaraderie.
Who was the best player you ever had to guard?
I knew you were going to ask that question. That's a tough one, man.
Yeah, you mentioned the big guards.
Yeah, that's a tough one because I played against a lot of great players, and I was just thinking about that before we came on the interview because I figured you were going to ask me that question. I would have to start with Glen Rice because I had to play against him every day in practice. Glen was 2 years ahead of me, and Glen was not a great ball handler, but he would beat you up offensively. He was similar to Bernard King. When he got the ball, or even when he didn't have the ball, he knew all the little intricacies and the tricks of the trade. And, I stole a lot of stuff from Glen. And then I would have to say, outside of that, Larry Bird, once I got to the NBA, the times that I was blessed to guard him, I guess you would say, because he's a legend, someone that I kind of looked up to. He was the first player that I ever guarded that was taller than me that had a jump shot. And so, with that being said, all Larry needed was a micro of an inch to get his shot off. And so it was really tough to guard Larry Bird. Another guy I would say who was, a nemesis of mine, we didn't really get along, as players, just because of our competitive nature, nothing personal, but Reggie Miller. Because Reggie Miller was Reggie Miller was so elusive in terms of moving without the ball, and his teammates were always looking to set screens on his defender, and so you had to be conscientious of where Reggie was at all times. And he was another guy that had such a quick release on his jump shot. So those three guys were probably the toughest matchups for me as a player defensively. But let me mention, none of those guys could guard me either.
All right, guys, you heard it here first. So I have two more questions before I got to let you go. So your NBA career ended in 1998. What have you been doing since then?
Oh, since I retired from basketball, man, I've been doing a lot of stuff. In terms of basketball, I've started organization, 9-star basketball camps and scouting services. We do player development and exposure camps for college prospects. And, that's something I've really, put a lot of my time and effort into. And we've expanded here in the last 6 months. And so we're doing, exposure and combine camps. We're going to expand to Europe as well. So we want to just basically give back to the game. And so that's what I've been doing. I've coached a little bit. I've coached in a lot of alphabet minor leagues other than the G League. I coached in the ABA, the IBL, the CBA. Then I was a head coach at a junior college up in the Seattle area for 3 years. I was fortunate to send 27 kids in those 3 years to 4-year schools. And so that was really a highlight of my coaching career for me. And that kind of transcended me into doing the 9-star basketball program. And that's where I am currently.
All right. So the last question is actually the one that everybody struggles with. I would like to know your top 5 players of all time: 1 point guard, 1 shooting guard, 1 small forward, 1 power forward, 1 center, and a 6th man who can be any position.
Okay, let's start with the point guard. The best point guard ever is Irvin Magic Johnson.
Locked in.
The best 2 guard to ever play is Michael Jeffrey Jordan.
I like your team so far.
The best center to ever play is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
All right.
The best power forward to ever play is Tim Duncan.
All right. Small forward.
The best small forward, yes. The best small forward to play is from French Lick, Indiana, Larry Bird.
Wonderful. I love your team.
And the best 6th man, I would have to go with, now this is a tough one right here, the best 6th man.
That should be one of your favorite players then.
Oh, man, let me think. The best 6th man, because I need a 6th man to come in and play multiple positions.
So much for easy.
Man, I would go with, oh my God, it's still tough. Let's just throw it out there, man. I'll go with, Scottie Pippen, man.
Oh, wonderful. Like it. Oh, I think your team would do well. I can
because
picture
Scottie can come in and play multiple positions. He can play the point, the 2, or the 3.
Absolutely. Sean, it was great having you on the show.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
All right, and you listeners, see you next time.